Okay, this is the Acton Forest and Conservation Committee for February, no, I got the wrong one here. For March 20th, 2018. Everybody here except Mark Hurd. Approval of minutes from February 20th. You all have a copy of February 20th minutes? Comments, questions?
They wanted to take it into consideration as being part of.
Right, well, I think they've both kind of all of them have gone in the last 50 years from being one of the top places in the country to wherever we are now.
In terms of deer hunting.
Well, just the animals.
Oh, okay.
I mean, somebody back then shot an enormous bear, 600 pounds. I'm told.
Down by
All
Black
of-
Swamp.
You looking for a motion, Carl?
Yes, looking for a motion. I don't know what's going on the other
I'm
end.
not quite, I can't quite catch all that conversation.
We can't hear it, so I'll take a motion.
I make a motion that we accept this.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
I would just have one argument with the last sentence on page 2, B. They are both against any logging or harvesting activity on this parcel. I didn't sense that they were against it, but they just wanted it to be put in perspective with the other values that were to be found on the parcel.
Well, or left longer than 20 years. I mean, it was a mess, the last.
I can reword that.
I would look at it as concerns more than anything else at
Yeah.
that point.
Right.
I just think it's maybe a little too strongly worded.
Yeah. I can reword it.
What would we amend it to? Express concerns?
They both expressed.
Or,
Well, it stems from past logging activities on the property is what it
Right.
stems from. So I think it would be a concern about future harvests because of past logging operations on the town forest piece.
They both expressed concerns regarding any logging or harvesting activity on this parcel in the future.
I
Period.
would think that'd be fine. Anything else is conjecture without having them here, so. Because I didn't quite gather, the comment that was made about that had more to do with, in Dave's words, the heavy logging on so many properties around town. Now, that might have been specifically about this piece, but the words out of his mouth were more of a overall concern to compensate for the heavy logging elsewhere, was my impression behind it.
thank you.
And Andy had related the story that when he was 10 or 11 years old and that was logged, his dad told him it would be a long time before there'd be a deer yard up there again. That was back in 1980, probably 86 or 7
Okay.
when it was logged.
So that may be the basis for the
Oh,
comment,
yeah.
but that they didn't actually specifically address this lot when they made that statement in this meeting.
And he had previously.
Exactly.
He-
Oh,
when he-
okay.
The first time he came in, he
Gotcha.
told that story.
Okay.
The first time.
Yep. So, yeah, I guess as far as the minutes would go, I would just lay with the concerns part.
Okay, we'll make that amendment to the minutes. Old business, Hebo Road, we have gotten one more response, so that makes, I think, 6 letters and 2 phone calls now. The last one, it's just an email address, and he'd like to be kept abreast of what we're doing.
The
Beyond-
landowner being,
Pardon?
Who?
He doesn't, oh, there's a name here. Paul, Cucchiaro, maybe?
Cucchiaro?
Cucchiaro?
it's not ringing a bell with the particular property necessarily to me, but as far as like where it is.
Where it
or anything like
is. He
that.
doesn't say which parcel that's his. But we'll get him on an email list.
Yep.
so that- Next steps on Hebo Hibo. I know we had talked about eventually maybe trying to get a landowner meeting together. It would be nice if we had heard from more abutters at this point, where there's 18 abutters. Probably the chances of us getting a meeting with 50% would probably be a high number, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The problem there is we have to have consensus from everybody,
From the abutters, you mean?
all the abutters, right? So I guess we probably need to keep reaching out. You think we should do a follow-up letter?
I wonder. Probably wouldn't hurt. And then we can express the notion that we would like to have a public meeting sometime late spring, early summer, with as many of the abutters as possible, at which time we can hear their concerns and we can express what we hope might become of the road. But really, the only governing mechanism that I think we can't mandate anything. We have no
No.
right. We have no ownership, so it's going to have to be the directive is going to have to come from the majority of the abutters, I think, for anything of value that's going to be able to be done out there. But I think it's worthwhile to keep raising the notion of that whole corridor as being similar to the rec fields or the town school ball fields in terms of the notion that with increased use, there'll be increased awareness of its value and a rising tide of sentiment will float some boats or ATVs or something. It's an educational bit of work that we're taking on here, I think, more than anything, initially. I don't think we're going to be dropping any gravel on there anytime soon. But I'd be curious what other folks think about it.
Anybody else have ideas on how we promote this to the abutters?
Well, I guess that's the question right now is, are we actually promoting something or are we asking for information in order to find out what to promote at this point?
Well, we were talking recreational trail.
Right.
No, I do follow that, but I mean, as far as like, the ownership question, the what we can do where type of thing, I mean, that kind of was something trickling down from the legal ramifications and the legal interpretation of what was there, and
One thing, Carl, we have had some more material that further corroborates, in my mind anyway, the notion that we have of a public easement existing, and that the width of the public easement is 3 rods, which is what, 49 and a half feet or something. But there is still the area of concern expressed to us from the Maple Grove Cemetery people. I was hoping they would be here tonight so we could kind of talk a little more about that. But I think we can,
Really?
on a field trip maybe, at which they would be invited, we could see if we can address, as one group, with the same concerns, something as simple as the traffic, protecting the roots of those sugar maples from traffic somehow as a first step that might help make them a little more accepting of our notions about this. Because what we can do with this is going to grow with the amount of communication that we successfully make as to what we'd like to see happen.
What's the difference between then what we have and what Lebanon has,
In terms of,
right away?
the only thing I can say is that I thought from Don Lukes and John Bozak was that they had gotten a similar affirmation from their land use lawyer that their public easement.
Yeah, my
exists.
impression is there is no difference.
So there's no difference.
Right.
So really, we don't have to, if you have a public right-of-way, I mean, they're assuming that they don't need all the butters on board.
Right, the only notion, the idea of having meeting with the abutters is so that it doesn't appear that, nor would it occur, that we're gonna be running roughshod over some of these issues that we haven't taken into account.
I do agree with that, Tom, but remember, we only have the ability to do what we have the ability to do in the first place. So, I mean, for example, you mentioned about, sugar maple roots and things like that, and while I agree that it would be great that those be protected, if that's within the right-of-way, then the town and anyone else has no right to tell whoever wants to do anything within that right-of-way that those roots can't be denuded somehow, other than for public outreach type of comments. So I guess as far as, if we have our jurisdiction with what the town and the town legal opinion happens to be, and we have an idea of, we're looking at having people come together and say, here's what we would like this route to be in a trail, anything beyond what is legal is going to be, it's out of jurisdiction. So we can talk about it, and we can talk about consensus. But I guess as far as talking about, we would like to do A, B, C, and D, and putting that in this letter that's going to beget, huge response or arguments. If it's out of what is our jurisdiction to govern, then I don't want to stick my hand in the middle of that. Again, if it's all PR and hey, let's talk about what the townspeople would like to do with this place, that's great. But I don't think necessarily that the Conservation Commission should be necessarily looking to pick a fight as a governing organization that we have no jurisdiction to decide upon.
I think their concern at the end of the last meeting was they've been contemplating moving that rock wall to the other side of those trees, and they were wondering if they could still do that given the width of the easement, if they'd be then impeding on the width of the road.
That would be a legal question that we haven't posed to anybody yet.
Well, my layman's answer to that would be is they can do anything they want to with
Yeah.
that wall, but whether or not it actually protects anything or is thereby protected itself. If the wall is already inside of the right-of-way and you decide we're going to protect our trees and put a wall or a barbed wire fence closer in toward the center line, which is even more into the middle of the right-of-way,
But
again,
then
that's
who
out of our
enforces
jurisdiction to
that
make.
anyway, being a public easement, who
Who
does enforce that if someone encroaches on a public easement?
But it would.
I don't know,
Well, no one, most certainly not us.
the public. Yeah,
It would
I don't know.
encroach on the public easement. Of question that I think that Stephen is raising is, who governs the use of the public easement?
I'm just saying, if the comments have already been made by, say, the cemetery, that the walls are already inside of the width of the right-of-way, which there are a fair amount of them, and I'm guessing are, although I've never measured it out from the center line. You know, in theory, someone could go out there and run an ATV right over a stone wall if it was inside of the right-of-way, inside of the easement, in theory. And as far as governing goes, you couldn't do anything about it, because it's in the right-of-way. Without civil, it would be civil, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
The more you narrow that right away, the more percentage of traffic's going over a narrower spot.
Right, so I guess I don't necessarily want to step in the middle of that myself, or don't think that we should want to. So, yeah, it's a consensus, it's public relations, it's, you know, can we have this thing be more than it is right now? But I don't know if we should be setting ourselves up as some governing body.
No.
No.
I would hope to just define, with the land use lawyer's help maybe, who retains jurisdiction within the public easements. Like if the cemetery group was in accordance with moving the wall to diminish the width of their public easement that is on their side of the center line. I think it goes back to defining who controls, who can make decisions about the public easement. Town meeting, I think, maybe, but I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
That wall is pretty far away from the road, though, I feel like. It's not right on the road.
And I was hoping that there may be
Be a difference,
some less,
you know?
The wall's not being moved, let's be honest about it here. Come on, people.
any other simple solution to protecting those routes.
No.
Best
In
thing
a
is-
word, no.
Best thing is to keep traffic from, more travel over them.
You have no jurisdiction to dictate travel.
Right.
So the answer is no.
So,
But if we had awareness and they were, I
yeah,
guess,
Right, again, and that's about as far as I can see you
Yeah.
going.
some signage maybe, or something.
yeah.
Well, it's largely an education job, I think. Because, as you say.
No, I agree completely.
We lack the legal authority to do it. Any motion? Clean from the papers.
I did look at some of the old warrants that were in the Springville Library, and I think it was 1972 that authorized the existence of a town forest.
Mhm.
That there was a restriction, I don't know what the vote actually was, or how, because it was just the warrant. I don't know the outcome of it, but they actually restricted it only to the town farm property at that time. So I don't know when this forest property was picked up as a town forest. Obviously, the town has it.
Gotcha.
But I don't know if it was ever declared as a town forest,
Right.
even though we've used it as one.
You're talking about the Hebo Harbor or?
Yeah, the Hebo Harbor, I don't know if there was ever or if it was necessary that it be declared as a town forest, but
I wouldn't, governing, I can't imagine it matters, does it?
no, but the original warrant article did specify
Oh,
that
yeah,
the
okay,
town
cool.
farm
Yeah.
was the exclusive at this point.
Right.
At this time. And then the next warrant article was that the governance of that was given to the planning board and the conservation committee together.
Mm-hmm.
So those two warrant articles were both there. So thinking in terms of your educational, if we can really hype up the end game, which is the lot itself.
Right.
And say, look, this is what it could be. And so the idea is to get the public so much in favor of what could be done on that lot, that they would say, hey, but let's not trash the road going into it. But, it's,
Should we just do more thinking on that and maybe come up with something more concise after a field trip this spring once the snow goes?
Yeah.
Maybe we might be able to make a little statement or two at town meeting pertaining to this, but it won't be anything earth-shattering.
Pertaining to what?
pertaining to this little project, we can
Yeah.
make a short statement or two to town meeting, just to share with them some of the issues we're confronting, and, again, it's just a PR, problem. But, as to your specific question, Carl, about trying to set up a meeting with the public and the abutters, I think would be worthwhile, but we'd have to do some planning beforehand to see what the guidelines of that might be.
So are we for sending a follow-up letter, or what was?
Do you think it would be wise if I were to ask clerk's office if they might ask if we were to frame this issue precisely for Brad Moore and our land use lawyer, to try and get some feel for what could be done with the authority of town meeting, whether we could actually solve it that way, I have no idea.
Forgive me, but maybe I've missed something. Maybe I have to take half a step back again. The easement exists.
Right.
What happens within that easement can't be governed
Well, that's,
within the public realm of, they can do on the public easement what they need to do or want to do. Then what is it that is legally needs to be determined about it?
whether the town, in my mind, it's a little bit unclear, it's totally unclear, whether the town, i.e. in the body of the town meeting vote, would have any jurisdiction to say, we would like, or we would allow the,
No, no. That's the definition of an easement, a public easement. So that's what I'm saying is, forgive me for, I don't mean
oh, that's
to
okay.
step on your words,
I'm-
but
I'm unclear on this, sorry.
if we were to come to town meeting and say we would like to designate this the Hebo-Hibo Scenic Way as leads to the town forest, great. We would like to bring about a public relations consensus and group to help plan future uses and mitigate future abuses. Great. Anything that has to do with the word govern is gone, in my mind.
Okay, well,
So therefore, if
Gonna
it's
have
not
a
a
very-
governing thing, then there's not a legal need beyond the confirmation of the easement.
well then maybe again, it just goes back to education. Small sign that says, please stay off the Maple Sugar Road.
Well, no, and I'm serious. I mean, anything along those lines is great.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that
Anything more is feasible.
you don't have jurisdiction to go beyond that. So I don't know anything about enforcement. I would tend to think no.
I know one of the abutters granted somebody a right of way to get in there,
I'm sorry? One of the
One of the-
abutters granted what?
a right of way for someone to get in there. After his attorney told him, somebody else asked that, and his attorney said, no, you shouldn't do that anymore. So it is sort of an unknown out there. There's no question about it. It's an unknown.
To those that own out there, even if the verbiage were out there in front of someone, they wouldn't know what it meant. I mean, if we've gone back and forth to the lawyer twice about what gates and bars means, I can promise you that 3/4 of the people that own land out there don't understand what can be done out there legally themselves either.
Right.
So no lawyer would ever say, should you legally grant a right of way, because A, no one would ever want to give up that stick out of the bundle of rights to someone else just because. And number two, they didn't have to because it's a public way anyway.
It's a public way anyway, right? That's what it is, yeah. Okay, well, we'll keep that on the agenda, keep the discussion going.
Just before, how did they do it with the Mousen Way? Did
The
they-
town owns it.
Town owns it, they
Town's-
bought it from everybody, or they owned it already?
I think whenever the railroad dissolved that, the town bought it.
Okay.
So they actually own that. That solves all the problems. In this case,
I can do within the $2,500 estimate without having to worry about any of the match. So if the infrastructure and I could only use the word like factory. I'm trying to create a factory. I'm trying to create an infrastructure to generate a $5,000 number in order to get the $2,500 for the $2,500 deliverable plan. When the deliverable plan can just be asked for $2,500 to the town and presumably granted or not, and the same plan is in your hand at the end of the job without having to be dealt with Project Canopy. So any questions that you have, please feel free to ask. But what I had done with Michelle the other day, after talking with Carl and Tom, was just to say this Article 47, as we drafted it here, was to just have her rewrite the wording without the Project Canopy request attached to it. Because Michelle is asking for some information by 3/23 here so that we can have information for Saturday, when the process is becoming a little more solidified on what the wording of our warrant article should be. So where I am right now, I guess, and where I need feedback from the committee, I suppose, would be to just ask, outside of the two that I've talked to, is there other concerns or thoughts that would have, and I last week had gone through a couple of hour training online in order to be trained to produce this application, to be eligible to produce this, to submit this proposal. So I did go through the process to be trained to submit an application, further solidifying the idea that I think the process is too cumbersome.
Gotcha. No,
So I guess I'd like some feedback from those that I haven't talked with about this, is to see whether this article, without using Project Canopy, is how we should move forward, as opposed to using Project Canopy and creating the other scenario.
I think I agree with your assessment that, you know, the town's already granted us the right with the planning board. I don't know if that's been rescinded, to control a town forest.
Right.
And, you know, if it meets our and we could run it by the Soils and Water Bureau, you know, whatever plan you come up with, you could run by somebody.
Right.
You know, but I don't know if there's any other, I don't think there's any other governing authority in the state relative to town forest.
No, the only reason that one would want to put this through the Project Canopy would be is if there were other grants required for different activities on the site as a result of this plan, that they could then also give 50% for later on down the line. So for example, if we were to say, I saw in the North Berwick application, there were kiosks, or there were plantings, there were, 4 or 5 other activities that for a town forest, outside of for some other public information, a kiosk perhaps, or something, I suppose, wouldn't even be applicable to a town forest. Trail work or something like that. So unless we were to be using this plan to set up asks for future grants for activities on this property, there would be no reason to do so. And since we haven't even gotten the plan together or know what's on the woodlot, it's a very big presumption that you would want to jump through those hoops, presuming there to be future activities that would require grants previous to it.
You want
if that
money
makes
to
any sense.
implement any kind of project, you have to have an approved plan that was done under their
Correct.
program.
So if you thought that you were going to ask for other monies for activities, you would need
You
to
gotta
be under the
back up and
Project
go to
Canopy plan,
step
right?
1 again.
So that we would not be able to do if we decide not to use Project Canopy. But again, the process, I think, is crazy cumbersome, and within the scope of this committee,
They're
As a
creating
town
a
forest.
project, like a stakeholder-driven project, and
Right.
writing the proposal, that is just one task of that project.
correct.
Yeah.
So with regard to a town forest and, some woods work that may happen on this piece, or even some trails that may be created. I just couldn't see jumping through those hoops to put that cart in front of that horse so far down the line. So anyway, feedback on that would be great. That way we can give Michelle the warrant article by the weekend.
And you're pretty confident of the 2,500 figure?
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and look at that here. She and I just put this together Monday while I was on the way back from out of town, and the training was late last week, so let me take a look at the number itself. I mean, if she did not seem to even blink an eye in thinking that if we needed it to be higher, that you could put it a little bit higher, but I'm looking at that number as something that would complete the deliverable plan in the same form for that number. So again, if we were to want to buffer it, she didn't seem to think that would bother. And that I can go back and look at my estimates for the deliverable plan and just make sure that that's feasible. But I've talked with Carl and Tom, and from what I remember over the week before and looking at my estimates for what it would take to produce, that number should be fine. So I mean, unless we decide we would want to amend it up a little bit for safety's sake or something, that's fine too, but obviously the higher you go, the less chance or the more question you would have of debate on the town meeting floor.
I would trust your judgment, Stephen, in terms of giving a workable number on that. I would make a motion that we proceed with delivering the wording, if it's to be amended, as you and Michelle find reasonable, and that we just have to nail down the fact that that draft article would be presented by an individual on the board on this coming Saturday in the morning there. They've got us down for 10:45 in the morning. So my motion would be to accept Article 47 as written, unless Steve sees the necessity of increasing that number for the cost of the plan.
Could we, I'm just looking at the wording, the last bit there, thinking of Andy and Dave Cody and their conversations. Could we make it sound more like potential timber harvesting, or
That would be perfectly fine.
shall that
Yep.
occur, or if it occurs? Just reading it, it might,
You could just change the from any to any, so that it reads from
Well, I
any
think-
future timber harvesting
Yeah.
activities rather than from the future.
Right, or like you use the word to any potential. The potential just implies that it's not a done deal,
yeah.
and I do like that word. But the
So
word
it doesn't
any,
seem
the
like
word any
that's
though would
taking
also
place
imply
either.
that it could be within any time frame as well.
Yeah, either way, I guess. Just maybe so
Stephen,
it doesn't
are you
sound like
okay
a
with, excuse me,
solid plan.
are you okay with presenting this on Saturday?
Yeah, again, I have to look at my schedule, but I mean, I'll have it, I mean, I can go back and forth with Michelle before then regardless, and you guys via email too if need be. Have to check with the boss at home to make sure we're around on Saturday, but yeah, I can have everything drafted up correctly and run by everyone by then for sure.
I think what would be valuable is to do some thinking on a one or two sentences that will encapsulate why we chose not to go the route of the grant, which, if worded carefully, would explain to a conservative taxpayer that this is a more, in the long view, a more fiscally responsible way to handle this particular proposal that would be presented by accepting the grant.
You think we need to explain that?
I think not sure how much in the public realm the notion of the grant has been aired, but I think you might expect that as a question. And you should
Can we
have-
address that just
I would address it
verbally at
if
the
it
town
comes up,
meeting?
I don't,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Believe me, that statement would be prepared, but I don't know that I would just necessarily put it out there without having anyone ask of it.
Or if you could say that in a sentence.
Sure.
okay, well,
Okay.
I would, my motion needs a second, I guess.
Okay, do we have a second on Tom's motion?
Sure.
All those in favor? So that's Saturday, right, that we take this to the warrant finance? Select-
Final recommendation by town meeting. I'm not sure about this new date here.
Not sure about what?
The date on our agenda that says final.
Friday, it says
warrant-
Friday, but I thought you told me Saturday.
It is
Probably wrong.
Saturday, but it's not April 27th, it's Saturday, March 24th. Excuse me. Yeah, March 24th, upcoming Saturday.
Saturday,
I'm not
March
sure what
20.
this new date is.
Sorry.
We heard at the Board of Selectmen's meeting tonight that
Is there a time on that?
yeah, you can't promise, they won't promise you that it will be exactly at that time, but, because we're following roads and bridges, which has been allotted at 10 a.m. roads
You
and
saying we
bridges.
should pack a lunch?
Well, you might pack out,
What you getting at?
if you came 15 to 20 minutes early, you'd probably be safe. I don't think it ever goes faster until later in the morning.
Speeds up around lunchtime.
We'll make sure we get here in plenty of time.
I mean, it's good to take the temperature of the meeting anyway, but, and this, again, they're not voting on this date, they're just
Right.
listening
Just
to
present.
proposals, right?
Okay. So Steve, Tom and I, does anybody else want to come? Okay. So the next step on that will be kind of waiting to see whether it gets approved. New business, any new business tonight?
I have one.
Sure.
So I spoke with Betty at the Acton Chapley Youth Conservation Course. She's their
Yep.
program director. She's currently in the process of writing a proposal for a 319 grant for the Mousin Lake watershed. She'll be at the selectmen's meeting on April 3rd, just presenting the project to them. Right now, she's just kind of looking for support in the town as she writes the proposal. York County Soil and Water will be sub-granting and managing the project. But right now, she's just kind of trying to get on everyone's radar in the town and just kind of letting everyone know that it's in the works and a potential 319 grant for Mousin maybe
What
happening
what
in the
is
near
the-
future.
Yeah,
Focus
back
of
up
the
and tell
grant.
me what that is vocabulary. What's a
Okay,
319?
so they've had many phases of these in the past.
Oh, yeah. We've done a lot of 319 something.
Yeah.
Well, Blossom Lake was impaired.
Okay,
It was on the list of impaired lakes back
So-
probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And we probably
Was
had,
removed.
I don't know how many 319 grants, and got it off the impaired list. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's good that
Yeah.
that they keep going though, because if they didn't, it would probably get back on the impaired.
I don't know what a 319 grant is. I don't
Well,
know
she
what
can
it's
tell you
for.
that.
So they're under the Clean Water Act,
Okay.
so it's federal money.
Yep.
They have 604B money, which is for planning, like writing a
Yep,
management
yep.
plan.
Yep.
And then there's 319 money, which is the implementation money for implementing that plan once approved,
Gotcha.
similar to the Project
Yep,
Canopy
yep.
process. You can go through multiple phases of the 319 money. Actually, I think 319 money was used to create the Youth Conservation Corps in the first few rounds. But they recently redid their survey this past summer, so they have new sites. I think they're focusing on major road sites in the watershed this time around. And So yeah, the 319 money is coming from the federal government to the states and then through a competitive grant writing process. It's dispersed. Towns and the districts are eligible. The water body has to be impaired or threatened. Mausam is not, but it's still on the list of priority watersheds because it's on the watch list.
Right.
Like it's kind of, it could go either way at this point, so they're, giving it priority to the funding. So yeah, there's been momentum, in the watershed, pushing towards having another round of grant funding to fix the sites they found this summer. And, they're putting in a proposal, so the project, I think, would start January 1 of next year, if funded. I don't think the specifics really worked out, so she's really presenting just to get some support and figure out what the town, I guess, what they want to do and what they can do.
Hey, how would this integrate with the YCC group?
What's that?
Would this be kind of integrated with the YCC?
It will.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that's the nature of the hands-on.
With the Youth Conservation Corps, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, I guess, in a way will count as match. So they'll have a hand in the labor and installing many of these. I'm sure there will be some larger road sites that will be designed and engineered and need equipment.
And is there the initial grant is for the development of a plan?
Nope, they have a plan.
They do.
So this is to implement that plan and to fix erosion sites throughout the watershed.
Is that product of Forest? Well,
No. This is the Acton Chapel Youth Conservation Corps and York County Soil and Water.
so it's an
Teaming
in-house
up.
kind of.
But anyway, we're just getting the word out now and we'll update you.
That's the
as process.
EPA on the federal side.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yep.
That's very good. Yeah. And the town obviously has an interest in that,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah, I don't know how many phases of the 319 they've done up to now, but yeah, Mausam has been a success story, so.
Yeah, I mean, when I started there 15 years ago, they were doing 319s in
Mhm.
Dawson. We just finished,
Yeah.
it was not that many years ago, finished up, so it was a long process.
And I think it's the outer watershed, but the town farm property is Mausam River watershed.
Yeah.
Right on the fringes, but.
Right.
Do
Good,
you have any erosion?
okay, well, keep us up to date. Glad you're at York County Soil and Water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excited.
That's good.
Was that a surprise? It sounded like it was a little exclamation point or a question mark at the end of it.
What? Oh, I'm glad she is. I was on the board for 15 years. I just left recently, and there's been some change. One gal left who had been there for, 3 or 4 years, and so I'm glad they found Whitney.
Yep.
You know, she's somebody
There was a
local.
surprise, a look of surprise or something there in your face, or a comment, an exclamation point at the end of
No,
the
it's
statement.
just,
like,
I'm glad that worked
Yeah.
out. You never know when you transition, how things will work. It's probably a great fit.
It's an important piece of the environmental puzzle. They do an awful lot of work. Not only do you have all the photos and aerials and
Right.
time frame of what's happened and been done on the land in the county, but they're an important agency.
Okay, anything else? Motion for adjournment.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you all for coming.